back to The Reason We Learn. I'm Deb Fellman, mom, homeschooler, educator. So yesterday when I was on the live stream with Carlin, I mentioned, I think kind of in passing, something about how there are people probably making money from the whole woke ideology, putting it into the schools, the curriculum producers, all that sort of thing. And I kind of said it, I mean, I didn't have a lot of details. It was just a gut thing that I figured, I look at the books, White Fragility. She's making a fortune. Look at Ibram X. Kendi. He's making a fortune for his speaking fees. I just start to, I get cynical and I think, like, who's making money? Follow the money. And what shows up today, this article in the Daily Signal by Jarrett Stepman, The Woke Managerial Revolution Goes to School. Here's some of the explanation. So, this article starts off telling, reviewing a lot of what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, some of which he's reported on, Carlin's reported on it, what's going on college campuses, private schools, what's going on at Loomis Chaffee School, introducing mandatory diversity, equity, and inclusion training, San Diego public schools. I did a video on that, how they've overhauled the grading for fear of racist impact. New York City schools are following. KIPP schools is dumping their work hard, be nice slogan. I mean, we've just been covering so many of this. I have, Carlin has, and of course, he has as well. Loudoun County, Virginia added punishments for staff. If I worked there, I'd be punished, who spoke out against it or even said anything the smallest bit disparaging about the diversity, equity, inclusion training substance, like the material. And I guess they removed the punishments after the policy drew media attention and there was public outcry. But the fact that they had the impulse to do it in the first place tells you what you need to know. So a lot of people have been asking, why? Where is this coming from? Like, why all this sudden hard push to get this stuff into the schools? What is this? What's going on? And so here it is. These ideas have emerged alongside the surge of administrative bloat occurring in K-12 schools in the last several decades. What do they mean by administrative bloat? Well, have you noticed how many vice principals and director of this and administrator of that your kids' schools suddenly have? I would say suddenly over the last decade. Yeah, that's what that is. It seems the seemingly exponential growth in school administration has created two serious crises. The first, of course, is the rising cost of public education, where a much larger share of the budget is devoted to administrators who make much more money rather than teachers and students. This has often come at the expense of teacher salaries, which have generally not increased in line with upticks in school spending. So while teachers might get raises, the administrators get more raises, and more money is going into hiring new and different kinds of administrators. And of course, their base salaries are higher. So when they talk about, we're pouring so much money into education, it's not really going to the education part, is it? Okay. My colleague Lindsay Burke, also director of education policy at the Heritage Foundation and education researcher Benjamin Scafidi, I think, an economics professor at Coles College of Business at Kennesaw State University, explained this process in 2016. So we're going back 4 years that this was already underway. But guess how far back it goes? Since 1950, public schools have dramatically increased their staff compared to the number of students. So student populations have been going down steadily, believe it or not, even though you probably look at your school and see trailers outside and say, what do you mean they're going down? They really are. Overall, they're going down. Burke and Scafidi used District of Columbia schools as an example. According to data that District of Columbia Public Schools submitted to the U.S. Department of Education, the district's public schools experienced a 3.1% decline in its student population between the 1993-94 and 2013-2014 school years. Burke and Scafidi wrote, despite this decline in students, D.C. Public Schools increased its staffing by 7.7%. All increases are in full-time equivalents. And where did these staff increases occur? The number of teachers declined overall, but the number of administrators and all other staff grew by an incredible 19.3%. Students going down 7.7%. Why are we increasing staff 19.3%? Growth in administrative staff appears to be hitting elite private schools too. And what are these administrative additions doing exactly? Clearly, many are foisting critical race theory and other ideologies on the student body and staff. Lehman laid out the source of the second problem caused by the staffing surge. Positions like Director of Diversity emerged in the early 2000s. Exeter Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion's Chief Stephanie Bramlett told the prestigious school's alumni magazine, as far back as 2007, the journal Education Leadership was emphasizing the need for administrators to confront issues of social dominance and social justice. Portland Public Schools created its Office of Equity in 2011. Holy Name High School in tiny Parma Heights, Ohio, added a Director of Diversity and Inclusion in 2018. Justice High School already had diversity advisors on the payroll, and Harvard Westlake's new commitments add to a 5-woman diversity team and a diversity conference held annually since 2018. This revolution comes through the work of high-priced consultants and consulting firms. Ka-ching! As in the case of Fairfax and other school districts. Meanwhile, the number of administrators continues to grow to meet the demand of the woke crusade. If you look at these schools, their roster of diversity, equity, and inclusion people has only grown over the past 5 to 10 years, Lehman said in an interview with the Daily Signal's Virginia Allen. They might have started with one diversity chief, and then because of that person finding issues, they hire another person, and then another person, and then you have a 7-person group who's responsible for diversity. And it's telling to me that as these organizations and administrators add administrators, the number of accusations of racism only increases. The number of identified instances of racism only increases. Maybe they're measuring better, but they may also typically be measuring more. You know the whole, if you look for a problem, you're going to find it. Now, what happens if your job depends upon the finding of problems? I mean, if you have these positions ostensibly to solve problems, to root them out, as they love to say, in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're going to root them out. We're going to root out the racism. Well, are you really solving the problem? I mean, are you saying racism is like dandelions, like weeds in your yard? I mean, can't we just go get some Roundup, pour it on there, and be good for the season? I mean, we're paying people a lot of money to go in and deal with problems that we now are always going to have, because they're not really going to go, all done. We're done. We fixed it. We fixed the problem. But if this education model really works, and remember, they've been adding administrators since 1950. They've been adding diversity, equity, and inclusion administrators since, well, at least 2016. So we're 4 years into this, and probably as far back, actually, I know for a fact, as far back as 2008. So how come the problem is just getting worse? It's getting worse and worse and worse. Really? It's getting worse? Like kindergartners are coming in more racist than the prior year's 6th graders? Okay. That many of our colleges and universities are radical should be no surprise to anyone. After all, William F. Buckley wrote God and Man at Yale in 1951 to explain the left-wing drift of his school and many others in the last half century. The situation has become much worse. It's worse. So we spend more money to solve problems that get worse. Wait a minute. We're not really solving the racist problem, are we? We're just solving the problem of a bunch of educators needing jobs, and they're not really educators, right? They're administrators. We've solved that problem. We've solved an employment problem for these people. I don't think we've solved a problem of racism, nor do I think we've solved any problems for the kids as far as education goes. So the problem of radicalization of students is getting worse. The problem of racism, I don't think, is really getting worse. I think that's just, we need that to justify the positions. And now we see the same process transforming America's K-12 education, where college-educated administrators and diversity officers, the well-paid apparatchiks of social justice, increasingly foist critical race theory onto teachers and students, often at taxpayer expense. No, always at taxpayer expense. So you might be wondering at this point, what kind of staff surge are we talking about here? Like, I mean, what kind of percentages are you talking about? Oh, well, let's take a look, shall we? Okay. See, this is what it looks like. You really need to visualize. This is what you need to see, because I read you the numbers, but you need to see it. Okay. That's the beauty of video. You can see stuff. So what do we have here? Student population going down, total staff going up, lead teachers going down. These are the people in the classroom with your student. And here are the administrators, all other staff. Now let's look at some of the costs, shall we? Okay. District of Columbia revenue per pupil, $29,427. Oh boy. $29,400 per student per year. But that's not really going into the teachers in the classroom, is it? It's not really going into materials. It's not really going into anything related to their achievement, is it? Okay. Just so you know. Now, I did take a look at what that achievement looks like. There was a research paper done about the school staffing surge, decades of employment growth in America's public schools. So here we have that picture in terms of percentages across the board. 96%. So this is here, 96% student body, 386 total school personnel. Okay. That's in 1950. It started to go up. It went up 386% of what they had in students. Now we're at 702. But our increase in students is only 252 of what it was then. Okay. Does that correspond with improvements in any way to achievement? No. See, reading's actually gone down. From 1992 to 2008 went down, and math stayed flat. No improvement whatsoever. And we know in specific schools, it's gone down by a lot. This is just across the board American public schools. So in sum, there is no evidence student achievement in American public schools improved when there were large increases in staffing. There's zero correlation. And yet, American taxpayers have been paying for increased staffing in public schools for decades, with public school teachers and non-teaching staff outpacing the rising number of students. It's actually a declining number of students. Thus, pupil-staff ratios and pupil-teacher ratios in American public schools have declined dramatically since 1950. So also when they tell you we need more money because we need, to reduce student-teacher ratios, oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't think that's the problem. But they sure are pouring millions upon millions. Actually, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry right now. The, diversity, equity, and inclusion training industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Our kids, our future, our tax dollars, okay, are creating jobs for people who are literally sowing the seeds of division, hatred, and communism. If we're going to be honest about it, let's just put it on the table. What they are preaching is no less than Marxism. And they're just packaging it as diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they get a nice big, pat on the back for being so virtuous as they bilk the taxpayers of this supposedly free country to do it. So you're paying for your own demise. You're paying for your children to be brainwashed, to hate their country, hate themselves, think you're an idiot, think you're at fault, you're complicit because you're older than they are. So of course, anything that's bad, you did. The way that they're absolving themselves, especially if they're white, is to adopt all of this. They're being told if you're mindful and if you go inside and you address your own biases and your implicit bias and you accept this and you do the work, that you will be cleansed of your guilt. But guess what? Mom and dad are still guilty, especially if you won't get on board with what your kids are doing. If you criticize this, you'll be on the outs with everyone, your neighbors, the teachers in your kid's school, the administrators at your kid's school. That's why when you go in to complain and you're heading straight into complain to administrator, you're not going to go to the teacher. It's probably not even their doing. They're just following orders. Most of them now agree with it. Many who don't agree with it have either left or gone to different schools, or they just keep their mouths shut so they can keep their jobs. But you're complaining to the very person whose job depends on this continuing. So of course they're not going to listen to you. If they listened to you, they'd probably be out of a job, or they would have to be responsible for someone else losing their job who may in fact be their boss or on the same level. So how high are you going to go? You'd have to go all the way to the tippy top, and then they're looking at, I got all these 6-figure earners I got to do something with. What am I going to do? And yes, many of them get to that level. If you're talking about big school districts, depends if they're the director. But all these other lower positions, I mean, I just know what it is in my city, and these people are making, on average at this level, they're making upwards of $80,000 to $90,000 a year to do this to your children. You can go check it out. It's all public information what they make. So you go check in your own district. Start asking more questions about where your money's going, and show up. And it's all about being good and angry, right? Well, I think it's time for parents to be good and angry. That's my take on this. I think it's time for parents and taxpayers in general, even if you don't have kids in the system, to be good and angry about where your tax money is going. So if you're one of those people who votes on the bonds for school and is all about, yes, we need to pay the teachers more, you're getting taxed more. You were sold that it was to pay the teachers more. It's not paying the teachers. It's not. Teachers get their little raise. But part of the reason they're still coming back more for, more money, and it's not about reforms for the classroom is, well, if they're unionized, it's because they're on board with a lot of this. But if they're not, they're coming back for more money, it's because they are seeing people in administrative positions getting paid more and they're not. And they're the ones left holding the bag, teaching something they don't have a say in, with a bunch of students who increasingly are empty-headed little woke robots. So this is what's going on, folks. Yeah, it's about the money. Follow the money. So if you like this content, I hope you will subscribe. Slam that subscribe button. Click the bell to be notified when I make more videos. And like this video, comment on this video, share this video, and that's the video.